"You're not welcome here," the waitress said curtly, her gaze briefly dropping to the man's prosthetic leg. Tom Granger, a 75-year-old retired Marine, didn't say a word. His fingers trembled slightly on his cane as a hush fell over the small-town diner. A few diners glanced up but quickly looked away, avoiding involvement. Not a single voice came to his defense. Exactly one day later, the low rumble of a black SUV echoed through the diner's parking lot and marked the beginning of a day this quiet town would never forget. Tom had lost his left leg to an IED in Iraq in 2006. Since then, he had lived alone in a weathered trailer on the edge of town. Every morning, rain or shine, he walked nearly 2 miles to Sally's Café, not for the food but for the routine and the small comfort of sitting at his favorite window booth. On the way, he would collect litter from the sidewalk, straighten, tipped over trash cans, even help children who'd fallen off their bikes. He never asked for anything in return. People knew him, or at least they used to. On that particular morning, Tom entered the cafe like he always did, nodding quietly at a couple of familiar faces. But behind the counter stood someone new, a young blonde waitress with cold, unreadable eyes. She took one look at him and frowned. "We don't serve people like you," she said bluntly. Tom blinked. "All I wanted was a coffee," he replied gently. "You'll have to leave," she said, her voice firm and final. No one moved. No one intervened. Tom slowly reached into his wallet, pulled out a crumpled bill, and set it on the table. Then, with a soft sigh, he turned and walked out. A chuckle rose from a booth in the corner. Outside, the sky was already overcast, but the weight pressing down on his chest made it feel heavier still. Tom had faced fire, loss, and survival. But being treated like an unwanted burden in the country he had sacrificed for, that left a wound far deeper than any battlefield injury. As he made his way down the sidewalk, a group of teenagers buzzed past on skateboards. One veered too close. "Get out of the way, old man," he laughed, disappearing around the corner. Tom leaned against a lamppost to steady himself and took a deep breath. Looking back through the diner's wide front window, he could still see people chatting, sipping coffee, scrolling their phones, living the very life he and men like him had fought to protect, now turned indifferent to his presence. His phone buzzed in his pocket. An unknown number. He never answered those. But today, curiosity won. A single message blinked on the screen. "Report." "Received. Stand by." Tom furrowed his brow. He hadn't reported anything. Had he? The clouds rumbled overhead as he began the long walk back to his trailer, step by step, left, right, a rhythm he'd followed since his days in uniform. His back still straight, shoulders square, but inside something cracked. For the first time in years, his eyes stung. Rain started to fall lightly as he reached a small bench near the park and sat down. He pulled out a small notebook from his coat pocket, a habit formed over decades, and began to write. Turned away. No explanation. Just told to leave. His handwriting shook slightly, but the lines were clean, precise. As he sat, a young couple passed by. The woman whispered, "Something." The man turned to look at Tom, then quickly guided her forward, picking up their pace. Back home, the routine was the same. Coat on the hook. Hands washed at the kitchen sink. Then silence. Tom stared at the photo on the wall. His old Special Forces team. 10 men, full of youth and fire. Only 6 were still alive. On his table sat an old radio he still used to catch, the evening news and a worn leather-bound journal stamped with gold lettering. Delta unit, always ready, always won. He didn't post about what happened. Didn't call a friend. Just opened the journal and added a quiet entry. Then he poured himself some tea and sat near the window, eyes scanning the darkness beyond. A stray cat, the same one that came around, most nights, crept inside through a cracked door. Tom patted his leg. "Hey there, Colonel," he whispered, giving the cat the nickname of his long-lost commanding officer. The wind howled outside, whistling through the edges of the door, like distant voices from his past. The radio crackled again. A broadcaster's voice broke through. "Tomorrow marks the anniversary of Operation Guardian. where American troops. Tom turned the dial. That chapter didn't need retelling tonight. He flipped through the pages of his journal. Names, notes, symbols. Some names had stars next to them, others small crosses. Every year he checked in on the families of those who didn't come back. Tomorrow was Mrs. Kimball's turn. Her husband, Will, had pulled Tom to safety in Iraq and lost his life doing it. Every year, without fail, Tom left flowers on Will's grave and trimmed her bushes while she slept. He never told her who it was. Outside, the wind picked up. A black sedan idled across the street, unmoving. Tom saw it through the curtains but didn't react. You learn to tell which shadows are harmless and which ones aren't. Just you and me tonight, Colonel, he said to the cat, pulling the blanket over his lap, and the rain kept falling. By sunrise, the clouds had thinned, but the air still felt heavy. At exactly 6:15 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the gravel parking lot outside Sally's Café. The engine hummed low before shutting off. Moments later, 2 more trucks arrived behind it, each with SEAL Brotherhood Delta Unit decals on the rear windows. The vehicle's doors opened in unison. Men stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, disciplined. Their presence alone changed the atmosphere. No smiles, no greetings, just quiet, unshakable focus. At the front was Dean Harper, Commander Dean Harper to those who knew him during the war. Now CEO of a respected private security firm, and more importantly, once the man who led Tom Granger's unit. They entered the cafe with steady steps. Conversations froze. Forks paused mid-air. The blonde waitress who had served the insult the day before went pale, the blood draining from her face. Commander Harper walked to Tom's usual table, set a worn photograph down, one showing Delta, unit shoulder to shoulder in uniform, and gently placed a Bronze Star medal beside it. This man, he said, voice strong, eyes steady, stood between us and death more times than I can count. He came in here yesterday for coffee. You turned him away. The waitress stuttered, her mouth struggling for words. I didn't know who he was. I didn't mean... Now you know, Harper replied, his tone final. No yelling, no grand theatrics, just truth that settled like a weight in the room. The SEALs ordered a full breakfast, pancakes, bacon, eggs, the works. When it came time to pay, they pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was every dollar Tom had ever tipped this diner over, the past 5 years, carefully tracked by someone who clearly never forgot. One by one, patrons began to stand. A man near the window cleared his throat. Last winter, he said, Tom brought blankets to my building during that power outage. Checked on each apartment, never said a word. A woman added, my son's tire popped near the highway. Tom changed it, then walked away before we could even thank him. The cafe's owner emerged from the back, clearly distressed. I was off yesterday, he said, nervously adjusting his apron. I had no idea this happened. Harper turned to him. Then you'd better get to know who works for you. That man's blood is in soil you'll never walk. From a quiet corner, an older woman raised her hand. He's the one who places the flags at the cemetery every Memorial Day, right? Always before dawn. I've seen him. That's Tom, one of the SEALs confirmed. Never wanted anyone to know. The waitress tried one last excuse. I thought... He looked homeless, his coat was torn. He gave his leg, another SEAL interrupted, so you could judge people by their clothes. His tone wasn't angry, just painfully direct. The silence in the diner deepened. The SEALs finished their meals and began to leave. But just before walking out, Commander Harper paused and turned back toward the center of the room. Heroes don't need you to remember them, but we never forget. Outside, word had spread. Locals had started to gather. Some looked embarrassed, others confused, but no one spoke. The SEALs didn't drive off immediately. Instead, Harper stepped aside and made a call on his satellite phone. Phase 1 complete. Confirmed sighting. Moving to Phase 2. One of the younger SEALs leaned over. Sir, you think he'll accept it? Harper allowed himself a small smile. The first one all morning. It's not charity, he said. It's back pay. Back inside, the waitress returned to clean up the table. Her hands shook. Beneath one of the empty plates, she found a black business card with gold print. When you're ready to understand what service really means, give us a call. The owner quietly removed the "Help Wanted" sign from the front window as the trucks pulled away. One soldier jumped out and walked back into the café. He stepped up to the counter and faced the waitress. "Next time," he said calmly, "ask who you're talking to." That afternoon, Tom sat in his trailer, a journal open in his lap. The rain had stopped, and the cat, Colonel, was purring softly beside him. Outside, the low rumble of engines returned. 3 vehicles pulled up, the same black SUV, 2 trucks. The men didn't knock, they just stood outside, waiting. Tom rose, the journal still in hand, and opened the door. Commander Harper stepped forward, no salute, no introduction, just a quiet embrace between brothers in arms. "We've got a situation, Tom," Harper said, "and we need your expertise." Tom looked over Harper's shoulder at the team behind him, young men, alert, still learning. Then he looked down at his journal. "Mission parameters?" he asked, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Harper gave a nod. "Rebuild, restore, remind." A pause. Then a slow, unmistakable smile spread across Tom's face. He stepped forward without another word. The camera lingers on the photo still hanging in Tom's home, the Delta unit standing tall in uniform. It slowly pans to the faded American, flag fluttering outside his trailer door. Some never ask to be remembered, but we remember anyway. If you believe sacrifice should be honored and service never forgotten, subscribe to Steelheart Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.